Yeah, so my name is Thomas Kelly. I'm founder and CEO of Roadtrip Studios. I manage it obviously as the CEO, but I also am the creative executive, creative director here as well. And then I manage about sorry, let me do that again because the ambulance just decided to go through. Can
It's
you
all
hear
good.
that okay?
You're good. You're good.
Okay, perfect. Cool. So yeah, I'll start from the beginning. So yeah, my name is Thomas Kelly. I'm CEO and founder of Roadtrip Studios. I run it as creative executive, creative director, and I've got a team of about 10 people that work for me at the moment. But yeah, our biggest project so far has been Kinron, but we mostly work on a lot of immersive theater experiences and theme parks out of the UK, essentially. Yeah.
Okay. So, I'm gonna begin because, I'm already aware of what you do, and
Mhm.
I'm very familiar with the thing that connected on us was immersive experiences and entertainment.
Mhm.
You've worked inside some very established creative ecosystems, and now
Mhm.
you're building your own studio.
I
What
am.
did those larger worlds teach you that you wanted to preserve? And what did you know you never wanted to recreate?
Yeah, fair. Yeah, so I'll start off with the uh what I wouldn't want to do myself, and then I'll kind of talk about what we do, I think, a bit more uniquely. But obviously, I mean, anybody that's working at these larger companies knows there's a lot of pros and cons. So obviously, the pros that you get to work on these huge IPs. Often you get to work with legends, often people that you've looked up to your entire life. So those were all big pros for me, of course. And I got to experience that at Universal. I got to experience that later in Weta in New Zealand. And yeah, what's great about those companies is obviously they've got a lot of buying power and they've got a lot of sway in terms of getting things moving in terms of anything that's coming in from the outside. So that's working with external companies or getting resources together. All that stuff is kind of the easy part. I'd say that the hard part that I don't replicate is, or I won't try to replicate is basically the sheer size of these companies. I won't name anybody in particular, but I'd say any company that's over about 100 people or so will probably have this issue. Again, not always, but most of the time I kind of see it. Where you've got so many people within the corporate structure, and I say corporate structure because it's basically the difference between a creative structure and a corporate structure. But that corporate structure is made to mitigate risk,
Hmm.
but I'd say inherently creative design is risky, and the stuff that's really pushing boundaries is even riskier. I think that the biggest thing that I took away from these larger companies was even though it was great to kind of be in this bigger web, it was a web, and you were constantly getting caught in this web over and over and over again. And you have tons of people or friends of mine that are working at large companies, again, not to say names, over in the US, where they are the, junior design director that's under the executive director who's
Right.
above the creative executive director, and that's the senior production creative director wizard, whatever, right? And it goes up into this ether. And again, it mitigates that risk, but at the end of the day, it's a mishmash. And I would rather work at a company that operates like a kitchen, like where you've got a chef in charge and he's got a sous chef and
Yeah.
they're trying new things out and everybody's got their station versus being in a huge, huge corporate kitchen where we're trying to get as much food out as possible and stick with the main menu that sells
I
essentially,
mean,
right?
I think anybody would want to be Jeremy Allen White in that situation too.
Oh
So,
yeah, 100%. Yeah. Or the Gusto, you want to be
yeah.
Gusto, or, yeah. And yeah, so I'd say that was kind of the biggest thing. Other things, though, I think there was just a lot of pros with those big companies. But yeah, trying to figure out how you grow in those companies is obviously is a an interesting thing, especially in 2026, especially with the addition of AI and every corporation who's smart anyway should be looking at how they integrate that into their workflows and how to best use that with the resources that they've got. But yeah, going on to our stuff that makes us unique, that makes Road Trip and my team unique, is that I basically grabbed people from Weta, from Universal, from various companies here in the UK, and people that I really enjoyed working with. And I said, look, I've got these various contacts and I've got things coming down the line. And we lucked out with this one, which I'll hopefully tell you that story in a second. Um, where I said, look, I think we can actually operate this ourselves. This is the deal. This is how I want to run it. I don't want to get bigger. I don't want to get smaller. What do you think? And on every single one of those people came back to me and said, yeah, let's go ahead and go for it. And again, that trust is really hard to establish, and that company culture is also very hard to establish. So we've been able to kind of build that from the ground up, using people that I know how I work, and I respect their work, and I give them their space as well. And I basically act obviously as a creative director, but it's more about uh, basically just going around to these really amazing people that I put into specific positions because I know them not just on a professional level, but a personal level. And every single time we've been well, as long as the communication is great and nobody gets too ambitious or too greedy in that sort of way as well. We've been able to hit every deadline that we've put together. I have a really great niche and agile team, and they're quite a young team as well. So nobody's really coming to it with too much of an ego, really, or any big long resume. A lot of people are just saying, "Hey, look, same as me. I'm so lucky to be here. I can't believe we get to go hang out with each other for a pint at the end of the week." At the end of the week, and that was crazy. Wasn't that crazy?
Not a
And yeah, we're
bad
just
way
gonna
to
keep
end
doing that as
the
long as we
week.
can. Yeah, yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. Well, it's a pro being in London here,
Yeah.
so it's just like, yeah, pint, yeah, pint. Let's go for that. Yeah. So,
Did your taste change once you became the person responsible?
oh yeah. Uh, when you say taste, you mean like a creative design
Yeah,
or
in terms of like just design and even like the way that you manage.
yeah. No, well, I mean, I was lucky enough when I moved here to London. I was working at a company called Scruffy Dog Creative Group. They've actually just been bought by Journey. I think it was about 6 months ago. But yeah, I my first position there was as an art director, creative lead, and myself and a few others who I'm still friends with to this day. We were given control over the creative studio out of London, and so we were able to kind of build teams and again kind of play test how, and I was able to kind of play test how I'd want to run my studio someday as well. So again, pros and cons. But how I was managing things back then was much more on the creative side of things. So I said, look, how can I do better to create a better, story, or how do we create better artwork, et cetera, right? But at that time, I was so same as my artist at the time. We were so focused on the end product and going, oh my God, this has to be the best piece of art. It has to be the best 3D model, et cetera, right? What didn't really come until over time was that theme park designers or artists in general, anybody that's in video games as well or film, unless you're watching the bonus features, our stuff, unfortunately, is never really shown to the public.
Yeah.
So I've really had to pull back and say,
Unless you're
especially when
watching
I was the
this.
one. Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, exactly. I am the person that watches bonus features. Like it's probably
Same.
what got me into this industry, right? All of us, I think, the ones that are
It's a
just
lost art now with no more physical DVDs and Blu-rays anymore.
I know my favorite was the behind the scenes on Pirates of the Caribbean. They actually had a 1967 special from or I think it was 64 actually, but um, I think it aired in 1967 when the Pirates of the Caribbean opened up. But it was all behind the scenes with the original Imagineers and Wed working.
And all those
But
little pieces
yeah,
where they'd like hidden menus and you had like all those
yeah.
little Easter eggs that you had to like hunt down. All that
Oh
stuff
yeah,
gets
games and stuff.
just pushed aside.
Well, and as you said, it's a lost art, right? But like
Yeah.
that was when you got to show your art, right? Or you have
Yep.
these books. I've got a few here from the Lord of the Rings, which are, it's all of the um, amazing sketches that were done all the way through the films, either at Weta or elsewhere, right? But um, all
Well,
of
now
those
I got to
pieces of
ask, how
art,
many times have you watched the extended cuts?
oh, once every year, I'd say,
Yes.
right? And so it
Annual
depends on
tradition.
who's with me, right? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like if it's on, I'll watch it again. But
Yep.
like, yeah, I usually watch with my dad or my brother. But yeah, all these extended bits and these bonus features, those are the end products for our bits, right? But
Hmm.
as a business owner, you have to basically bring your mind away from that stuff and say, hey, look, I have to turn my artist or designer kind of hat off for a bit. I have to say, look, what is the end goal of this? What's the finished product? The finished product is going to be guests walking through that theme park or that immersive experience at the end of the day. So even though we could be doing better art, or we could be doing better 3D models, etc., does it do the job well? And does AI add to this to get the thing signed off quicker, better, faster, etc., right? So all those different things are coming into mind, and um, our biggest thing, it's a whole nother it's a whole nother conversation, but I always think about um, the respective time and the amount of time that it takes to go into some of these designs. So what I mean by that is you don't want to go down a road of trying to create a piece of concept art within a day or two.
Right.
As an artist, it's good to go watch a movie, director's cut, go take a walk in the park that has nothing to do with what you're working on, and that's when those really amazing ideas kind of bubble and come up. Right? If you're so focused on getting the product done A to B or A to Z all the way, down the line as quick as you can, you lose that respective time and the respect of the design process that we know and love. So we're trying to basically at Road Trip anyway find the balance between efficiency and art, and there is a balance of the two. But again, it depends on the week, depends on the mood of the artist, the mood of the team, and there's lots of different factors you can't measure. So as a business, I think I position myself quite well where even though I've got the creative ideas and mindset where I say, look, this is how it needs to happen, and this is how we need to respect that time. On the business side of it, I know that, look, end of day, this is a business. We need to make money, and the client is first and foremost who we're creating this for. So, yeah, I think we've been able to find a really nice happy medium of the two.
And it does become especially a transition as someone who's now only starting to become more um not so much less art focused, but more of okay, creative working with more people than just myself or maybe one or two other people where
Yeah.
a creative project now has to have decisions made other than just that's a good idea, that's a good idea, that's a good idea. Because as the artist
Mhm.
inside, you just want to keep going, keep building, keep creating.
Yeah.
But when you're in a leadership role, you have to know when to be like, okay, we have to cap it or else we're only just designing and then there's no
Yeah.
execution. So then you end up realizing like, oh, this is the point where I have to take on authorship and
Mhm.
also not just execution, but it's also like kind of like when you're in that leadership role, you're taking on the responsibility of what we end up making together. My approval is being seen as like
Mhm.
this was the decision. Like so you're
Yeah.
becoming like the spokesperson of of an entire, team's worth of work.
And the filter,
Yeah,
and the other thing too is I'll say to that as well, because you bring up a good point. And a lot of designers, and especially me as a younger designer as well, thought that blue sky and sandbox kind of projects were the way to go. It's the best. This is we can build wherever we want. We've got $10 billion or whatever
not
it's going to be,
always.
and right, and it goes down this crazy route of whatever, right? And there's so many people that jump at it and they get involved with it, whatever. But it ends up being this thing where you get caught in this, as you said, like this undying sort of
Yeah,
loop of creative talks and whatever. But at the end of the day, you know, coming from a theater background, you want the show to open. You want people to
absolutely.
see it. You want to progress. You're like, okay, cool. I want to smell sawdust. I want to smell paint. Let's get
Right.
going, right? And
It's like tech weeks in
yeah,
2 weeks, guys. We gotta
yeah, let's
we
get
gotta
going.
keep going.
and and the thing is like I've always I'd say well as a business owner anyway, but I'd say kind of in my more professional life away from being a student, et cetera, right? Was I've always found that constraints were what gave me the best and most creative ideas. And I always, when I talk to a client, especially when I'm on a site visit, I start trying to figure out where the lines are. What's the stuff that can't change? What are the stuff that, is there a water feature that, or let's say there's a river that goes through the site, how do we keep that in mind? And then the other thing too, I say as well is if there's nature and there's trees, don't touch it. And I try to integrate that into the design. So we started doing that with Kinrin. I think there was only 5% of the trees that were either cut down or moved. Every single other bit, any of those other trees that are existing on the site we integrated them into the master plan and made sure that they sight lines for the entire park through Unreal
That actually makes
were able to work.
my
Yeah,
my next question then really like follows through with that then. What do
sure.
you think separates a place that has detail from a
Mm,
place that has belief?
that's a good question. Can you say that again? So
Whereas
what difference?
where we all hear the word immersion, and
Yeah,
I
sure.
think that it's dangerously coming close to becoming a buzzword, especially
Mm,
in this industry now,
it already
um,
is. Yeah.
because audiences they feel you can tell when an audience feels that something isn't working, even when they
Mm,
can't articulate it.
yeah.
And as a creative director, you are also looking at a concept that can be borderline all atmosphere, no point of view.
Mm,
So when you are overseeing things like this, what do you personally believe is like, especially with this project
mm,
like Kinran,
yeah.
where they say like the devil is in the details, and I've
Mm,
seen so many great posts on how even the tiniest thing, like the placement of a lamppost, can
yeah.
factor into what your mind will escape into.
Yeah.
Where is your kind of like philosophy in regards to that, and how do you like to execute that in the process of design?
Yeah, sure, sure, sure. Yeah, now I understand the question. Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think it's something that a lot of our industry forgets at the end of the day because we are kind of going back to the previous chats. You're so busy thinking about the overall ideal setting or the story or like how do we get people to the gift shop as quick as possible, all that sort of stuff, right? Oh, shareholders need to say this, or the IP doesn't really necessarily say this. We need to change it, move it this way. I have always found that, yeah, devil in the details, sure, but I think it's actually these micro moments that make us feel human. And what I mean by that, and it kind of goes into why we, call ourselves Road Trip, is the the question that I kept thinking to myself as I've grown as a designer is kind of a question back to you is what makes something timeless? And a big thing that I started seeing in the theme park industry was that people, large teams, um, kept basically putting IP on top of IP on top of IP, and we're losing all these different bits. It's like, well, why does Harry Potter feel timeless, and why does um let's say Fast and Furious not feel timeless, right? But the thing is it has nothing actually to do with the IP. I think when the timeless moments are in these micro moments that harken us back to other things that are just coming out of the ether in terms of either nostalgia or something that our family used to do when we were kids, or just a happy memory, maybe a sad memory, something like that. All this stuff that kind of unites us, whether it has to do with music or a nod or a feeling. None of it has to be spoken word. All of it comes from these small feelings, and everybody's very different. So target audience, et cetera. I know we're trying to get a vast net to make everything immersive, but actually, though, there's different things that you can tie in to maybe a larger narrative that does that wide net from the corporate side of my brain thinking. But actually, though, you can have smaller interactions that hit a certain target audience within that larger web, and that's how you're able to make people feel like this is quite timeless. An example, bringing Harry Potter into it, is I don't think necessarily you know the movies I'd say are quite timeless in a way, but what makes them timeless is the idea of going to a school and feeling alone. The idea, especially here in the UK, of going to an A levels, or going to these primary schools and having to put the suit on, and having this kind of camaraderie between all these different groups of people. Then all of us have that nostalgia of the castle, the mythical kind of understanding that maybe there's something more for us out there, and especially there's things that I can't relate to that are probably timeless as well, where people watching the Harry Potter films maybe as orphans, or people that don't feel maybe they feel bullied as well in school. All this stuff they relate to as well, and that is a human, timeless thing. Whereas somebody's watching it from Asia, somebody's watching it from America, Europe, whatever. that's what I think makes some an IP timeless. The minute that you start putting in these immersive uh things such as like, oh, let's just add a projector, it'll make it timeless, or let's add this effect and make it timeless, or let's add VR and it'll make it timeless.
Right.
All these little things, they're not actually talking about uh the human emotions that are never going to go out of style. And that's why I think storytelling will never go out of style, because that is in and of itself timeless.
The biggest takeaway that I've ever experienced is when I had spoken to while I was working at Disney, I had the pleasure of speaking to like several Imagineers, and one key moment that they said that if you can create something where
Mm,
when you open up the doors and you have a like gasp moment, then
mm,
that is true immersion. It's
mm,
like when the kids go into the chocolate room in the Gene Wilder Willy Wonka film.
mm,
It's that moment. It's the moment
mm,
of, oh, I have left the old reality behind and I'm in
mm,
someplace new. And it doesn't have to be grand. It can
mm,
be the slow, subtle immersion where all of a sudden your mind is just kind of like forgetting where you are at the moment. Or,
yeah.
like you say, it's a smell that evokes a memory or a sound that puts you in a mindset. Uh,
Mm,
Even again, like just the way that architecture is placed or the certain stylings that blend into each other. There are color patterns that are
mm,
used that are all like
mm,
all of those little things that I mean, I love the fact that there are studies as to the average eye level that people look
mm.
at signs so that they know exactly the measurement of where to be looking for things in
Yeah.
particular.
Yeah.
Like it comes
Well,
down to a lot of that kind of stuff. And
yeah.
I think the like I don't think people really understand that it's more than just like here's an idea for a ride.
Mm,
So
yeah. It's
with
a world.
that, with ideas, where do you think the best ideas usually get damaged? Do you think it's like in the
Mm.
pitch or in the budget process or like in execution or even in like leadership?
It's all the way through.
Yeah.
We're going back to human, we're all human. Making mistakes is timeless. you
Yeah.
know um but I think I don't think there's any project ever that has um not had its issues, or couldn't have been better, in a way, right? And even the best things that we can think about in our brains, like even the Lord of the Rings, right? All that stuff probably had various issues while they were filming, while they were creating things, right? But part of it, I think, is it's when artists lose their for lack of a better word, like oomph, like they lose their pride in what they're working on, or they lose their passion in what they're working on. Because I think anybody on the business side will, they'll find money, they'll take away money, they go home on time and that's it, right? But real X Factor projects come from people where they go to bed thinking about that amazing thing that they've got in their brain, and they want to share it with the world. It's about sharing. It's about getting back into the office and molding it and fixing it. Um, and I've had the pleasure of being able to work on some of those projects where I've literally just been up all night working on it, or my team and I are sitting there trying to finish things up. It's not because necessarily somebody's telling us to, but it's like because there's something within us that we have to create with this. And I think any artist can kind of relate to that. But when you lose that and you just say, "Oh, I just want to get this done," that's when things start feeling very mediocre. That's when things start feeling very corporate. And that's when all that magic, that, as you said, the spectacle, maybe like when you walk into that theme park or get that smaller bit, that's, when when the teams that are creating these things start kind of losing their fire on the project, that's when I think everything starts falling apart. And I would say that a lot of big companies, especially in the US, you've got so many people that don't creatives that don't really feel this listened to. They don't feel valued, whether they're being replaced by AI or a better system or efficiency issues or whatever, or maybe they're just spread too thin. All of these things are contributing to the lack of charm that we're starting to see, I think, in theme parks. But the good news is that even though those people maybe are moving away from those ways of working, they're finding their passion because again, money wise, that's a different thing. But like artists will always feel passion, I think. It's just depending on where that passion goes. So if their workplace is, let's say it's a big IP, but they don't feel fulfilled in that, they'll feel that fulfillment elsewhere. And I guarantee every artist that I know is finding fulfillment elsewhere if they're not finding it at work. And yeah, I think you want to, as a business owner anyway, or as an IP owner, or somebody that's really trying to push something that's immersive, you want to make sure that you give your team the confidence and the passion or the reason to have passion that a lot of people maybe lack. And that's when I think things will, even if things go wrong, they'll end up going right because you have the right people in mind. And what was it? What's the saying from Walt Disney? It's like, you know, you can have a dream, but you need people to make a reality. I think I'm misquoting that, but like that is 100% true. Um, and I found that again, going back to my team, I'm very lucky to have a team where they trust me, I trust them, and we've got really good passion for what we do. And it's about the craft, and we can apply that craft to any IP and story.
If an idea does get damaged, though, what do
Mm.
you think is the hardest of those things that I mentioned that is hardest to recover from?
Mm. Um, it's usually from it's almost like when I'm trying to think of a specific project, but like one time this happened to me was we had two really good ideas, and the client's thinking was, well, there's two good ideas, so we might as well make it one good idea. It's like a combo of the two, right? And it sounds good in your head, right? But if you had, let's say, again, going back to that chef in the kitchen thing,
Hmm.
if if I was a chef and I said, look, here's a caramel, vanilla, whatever, right? And that this is a dessert for you. Then there's this other one, which is a raspberry double chocolate cake. They're these two kind of very different things. And as a chef, you know that. And as somebody that you're trying both of these things, you're like, well, one complements the dinner in a very different, different way. But a client goes, oh, why don't we just put the vanilla and the caramel and the chocolate and everything together? And yeah, you're like, oh, this is great, but it loses the uniqueness of those two different things. So I'd say, even if an idea goes bad, or if you have a bad idea, or it's if you're going down this road of like trying to recover something, it's almost trying to recover not necessarily the originality, but the clarity of the story and the IP and the creative focus of your experience. So if you're trying to add too many things into it, it ends up being kind of band-aids versus being bold and looking back at something and being nice and clean about it. You can apply that to graphic design, you can apply it to Instagram reels or anything like that. Sometimes, oftentimes, less is more, and we need to trust the audience a lot more in terms of giving them enough and giving them something that is a bit more structured and yeah, I don't know, the ratio of everything feels a bit better. So yeah, I think the ratios and the blurring of things is I think the only time that an idea kind of goes bad. But I'm trying to think. I mean, the other part of your question was kind of how do you revert that, right, or reverse that? So
Yeah, how do you
yeah.
feel like, because what you could also be like is the way you're
Mm.
taking that. I'm wondering like where do you find the balance of like defending the original vision, but also, knowing
Mm.
that sometimes there's times where you can admit that the room found maybe something better.
Yeah, I mean, I used to be very passionate about my ideas in the room. But now, I mean, the more that you work with different people and different projects and things like that, you really do realize that, look, my next idea my best idea is around the corner, and all of these things are just sketches and conversations. So I and as much as I am passionate about being an artist and being a storyteller, the other part of me is very logical as well. So as long as somebody's able to back up, even with the facts of the world or the don't just say, oh, it's too expensive, right? But say like it's too expensive because X, Y, and Z, and then we can have a conversation and say, look, okay, what if we got rid of this? What if we, what if we took the cue and we use forced perspective and we cut half the set, or like that's the conversations that you really want to get into, where an idea doesn't die, it just basically gets fine tuned and it gets and that blurriness kind of goes away.
Yeah,
Um,
compromise doesn't
yeah,
always have to be the death of ideas.
no,
It's
usually
just
it
more of
is
an
makes it
evolution.
better. Yeah, evolution exactly, and I love that part of the process, honestly. So, I mean, again, you've got the blue sky ideas of things, right? But if we're able to agree that that is the overall arching idea and that's the guest experience, then after that, it doesn't mean that the ideas have to die. Maybe smaller bits of that idea might have to die, but um, again, but it's not even really dying. It's evolving into the finished experience, and we end up essentially taking these ideas and all the ones that end up on the cutting floor, you know, we're designers. We'll put them elsewhere. We'll work them up in different ways, and
And they can always come
um,
back for later use.
100%. Yeah, and so yeah, it's maybe it's the best idea that you've ever had, but maybe it's not good for this particular project. And I think we as artists, especially, just need to go, hey, look, it's not about my name on this project. It's not about the ego of the team, or it's not about how happy I am necessarily on this. Obviously, you want to keep your passion, but you want to make sure that you're in a room full of people where you say, look, I'm trusting them and they're trusting me, and we're all coming to this decision. And even if we don't always agree, we'll evolve the idea into something where I think we can all picture it and feel passionate about it.
That is that is a fantastic positive energy that can you can move forward with it because you're deciding that it's the no idea is a bad idea, but any idea can be used in a multitude of ways. Um, so let's now, going off of that, go right into Kinron. Now,
Sure.
I have been following this park actually since its announcement.
Hmm.
The Storied Lands was something that I had heard about because um, there it was one of those things where I had been watching videos about Puy de Fou in France and
Hmm.
that huge live entertainment style historical park. And then there
Hmm.
was a recommendation about, you know, if you like this, then you're going to be interested in this kind of park that's been announced. And I was like, you're right. Very good,
Hmm.
algorithm.
Yeah, there you go.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
and I love that this is being it's being hailed as UK's first live action show park. A live
Hmm.
action show park is not something that is really common, even domestically over by me. Uh,
Yeah.
so we there are elements of obviously theme parks that have live entertainment scattered throughout it. I
Mhm.
still think it is a very key integral. I mean, it's the entire basis of my channel, but
Yeah, right.
it is this is the first I've seen where well, it's first I've seen it in this way of a the experience being brought together. So what um if people want to know, by the way, more about it, I would suggest going on to
Sure.
Roadtrip Studios to find the link about the entire development, what to expect. You can see all the details there. I'll provide the link in the video description here. But what I want to ask you is
Hmm.
what can live spectacle do emotionally that ride systems alone almost never can?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, a lot of times rides, they act a lot like films, right? So you have a storyboard and you're able to move people and direct people in a way, right? Um, but I think what in the same way that theater does, it gives that freedom or the risk on in a way back to the audience. So even though the actors, let's say up on stage, they have a beautiful spotlight stage left. But if you want to take in the rest of the set and listen to what they're saying, but not have to look at them or whatever, right? You can. If something's a bit too gruesome or too emotional or too happy, even or whatever, right? You can look and see different other bits that maybe somebody else isn't. And I think a good example is Puy du Fou, where if you've been to the park, one of the best things about it is that you can go see the same show 4 or 5 times in the one day, and you can sit at different parts of the theater, the amphitheater rather. Um, but you can watch different uh, actions from different perspectives. You can see effects that you didn't see before. So it adds repeatability, where I think a lot of in terms of theme park rides, you're kind of told exactly where to go. You're told exactly where to go down, and a lot of it is just like, well, take me where I want to go and tell me a story, entertain me, right? But I'd say the other thing too is with rides, especially nowadays, they're so pre-automated that again they've taken the humanity in a way out of the theme park ride. So again, going back to efficiency, when you go on any of these Harry Potter rides, sorry, I'm bringing up Harry Potter a lot in this chat,
I
but
mean, it has
um,
practically taken over Universal, so you know.
yeah. Well, I've got good friends that worked on it, and I hope they don't mind me talking about it, but. Um, Harry Potter, I say it because everybody knows it and because
Mhm.
it's such a good idea, it's got so many good ideas in it and it's such a powerful and kind of world-changing thing in terms of theme parks, especially when I was um, training myself up in the theme park world. But um, those rides, or a lot of the modern rides are they're run with screens, they're run with robots, they're run without because they want the perfect ride every single time. But the thing is, if you've been on the perfect ride 3 times, it's the same every time. Something goes wrong, and what I mean that by that is it's planned to go wrong, right? And things happen, right? And as theme park fanatics as a way, you almost want to go when you know Space Mountain breaks down because you get to see it with the lights on. You know what I mean? But we add that stuff because we want to see things differently, right? No sunset is the same as like a very universal sort of thing, right? And there's beauty in every single bit of it. So with theater and why I came from theater and why I still love theater is because no show is the same in that same way. So the actors maybe are different, how they say a line is very different, and the audience is very different. And again, with the actors that are up on stage at Pitifoo or any of these kind of live shows and things, you're giving a lot of freedom to the actors as well to kind of change the mood and the feel of everything. Um, a really, really good classic example of this, I know it's not Pitifoo, but maybe people listening will laugh, but it's like the Jungle Cruise. Jungle Cruise is how old? 70, 80 years old or whatever, right?
Long, long
It
time.
yeah, it's timeless and it'll always be timeless because the show has nothing to do with the elephant that comes up and it's like, it sprays water at you and then it goes back in the water, right? Or the backside of water. That stuff is not going to change. But what does change is the skipper that you're with and the jokes. And even if you've heard similar jokes, they're not going to be in the same order. They're not going to be in the same sunlight, not with the same people on the boat. So all these things make that a very repeatable experience. And we have to again remember as theme park designers that even though efficiency and repeatability and the perfect experience is something that you want to strive for because it's very hard, 2026 is very, very achievable. And in a way, you want to put the humanity back in the theme parks and you want to put the things that could go wrong, or the nature and everything else back into it, the things that we don't necessarily as humans have control over. We want to put that stuff back into the experience to make it feel a bit more immersive, honestly, and something that is a lot more memorable. So
How
hopefully
do
that
you
answers.
decide when a moment should be awe versus intimacy with these kinds of experiences?
Well, I mean, my company and I are more on the visual side of things, but we're very lucky where we get to work with very good script writers, usually externally. A recent collaboration with Immersive Everywhere, for example, proved that look, these guys know exactly how to write an amazing script. They know how to do these immersive theater bits all the way from start to finish. What we do as Road Trip is we kind of come in and say, look, concept art wise, show set design wise, master planning wise, all that stuff is what we can obviously, we can lift that base experience up, but it always does come back down to story. And if you're able to, tell that story really well without lighting, without a show set, without costumes, etc., that means it's a really good story. So I think, kind of to halfway answer your question, we have a really good like a good big beginning chat essentially with whoever's writing that script. And we try to pull out key bits, and if we're lucky enough, we're able to kind of influence that story and say, hey, look, um, have you thought about maybe um, giving a breath here, for example? Are you able to give us is there a bit of rest at this part of the experience? Uh, Maybe to explain this a little bit better is like there was a project that we were working on recently where there was a major character that's in the immersive theater experience that dies kind of toward the end in the climactic point of the experience. And so it kind of went from the death scene to this kind of like rejuvenation scene where it kind of leaves you with a nice happy thought and off you go. But the master planning side of it, right, was you went from one room straight to the next room. And lighting wise, sound wise, everything blended. So, in a way, from our side of it, right, even though the script read that like, oh, it happens in this room and you're on to the next room, as if you're, again in a film, you're cutting from one frame to the other or one scene to the other, right? Physics and theater and everything doesn't work like that. So what we had gone to them instead with was that, look, the architectural columns, they're here, here, here. We want to extend this room this way, take away a little bit of this room. But essentially, we wanted to add a very long hallway from the death scene to this next scene. What that allows people to do is after the death, they can sit there and go, how do I feel about this? And we know we don't have to necessarily, you know, tell them how they feel about it or go down this road of like, let's, add sad music. All it was a really dark, floor lit hallway. And after the death happened, you walk into this hallway, there's no actual sound. But then as you're walking toward the hallway, there's a waterfall in the next room, which is that again rejuvenation sort of, happy thought
So
sort
it's
of
just
scene.
literally sitting in that moment,
Yeah,
it's a grieving tunnel.
correct. And and you can walk as fast or as slow as you want, but there is
Wow.
nothing pushing you to the next bit. But then the thing is sound wise, right? All you can hear from the very beginning of that hallway is just a slight kind of brown noise sort of sound, right? And then as you're going through the hallway, the light is dimming up slightly, but you're controlling it based
Yeah.
on your speed, right? But then also as you get close to that next room, the sound of the waterfall is also getting louder and louder. It adds that curiosity. But again, spatially and physically, we are creating a bespoke transition that every audience member has control over versus telling them exactly this is how they should feel here and when, whatever. So that's something that we can do anyway as show set designers or creative directors on the again the master planning side of it, without having to change the script at all. And the client was jumping up and down because that was something that they had felt was missing, but we didn't have the physical space to do it. But then we found it, and all it was through a transition space. It didn't need to be another scene,
And it's the
and yeah, it worked out
simplest design. And it's just
definitely.
you couldn't get more simpler. That
We'll
that's
see if it
that's
works
a
out.
yeah,
You
that's
know?
a way of like just taking the
Yeah.
easiest without complicating it and yet giving it the most amount of depth.
Yeah.
Um, that's a way that live entertainment actually understands audience psychology that other
Hmm.
parts of the industry sometimes tends to forget. There is, I feel, for the companies that have the budget to do the spectacle and use the technology they have, that's great because
Mm.
you do have to, bring in you're looking at audiences that are coming in from around the world, and maybe it's the only time they're ever going to be there. Uh,
Yeah.
but if it is something that is unique and centralized to something that is more than likely going to be getting repeat visits from either a region or at least from enthusiasts of this kind of thing. You want and that it's the same reason why somebody can go and see a play
Mhm.
repeatedly or somebody can go see a musical repeatedly.
Mhm.
Yes, they know the show, but the person who's performing it may bring something different to the table each time they see it. I mean, I've done Ren fairs in the past, and I've never performed anything that I've ever done the same way twice. Yeah,
And that's a good thing.
yeah,
And people always get nostalgic about what happened last time, right? But there's a fine line between um, nostalgia and something where you're going after something that's not achievable. So doing something again in the same way, in the exact same way, right? All you're going to end up being is very frustrated. But if you give people new freedom in the cruxes, I guess, of nostalgia, or like a nostalgic environment where new things can happen, that I think is something that we have been trying to kind of strive for in all of our different experiences. So again, it's an evolution of the story, or these people's stories, or these different interactions, rather than saying, oh, look, here's a new thing, here's a new set of rules, here's a new set of things that we want you to do. Because yeah, people, I think at the end of the day, obviously they want to feel that like, oh, I'm a stranger in this amazing place. But actually, though, I think that wears off very quickly, and people actually want to become almost the experts or the explorers, or they want to learn things. They want to feel like they're kind of leveling up in this environment, whether that's in uh, understanding a show, or going to a theme park, especially as repeat guests. And yeah, they want to come out of it feeling connected in some way, and maybe that is a way of feeling connected. But I think going and seeing a show that maybe you've seen 3 million times, but you have an actor who you love and respect, and you're seeing them for the first time in that role. Again, there's two nostalgic bits now coming together, and now it creates something new. The best version of Cabaret I've ever seen was with Billy Porter here in London, and I
oh
saw it. I think
God,
it was two
I'm
days before it
jealous.
closed. Yeah, and he actually went to my school, and I was like, I had to go see it. In
Wow.
Carnegie Mellon, and it was amazing because, and this is how he explained it, was you know uh he kind of came at it as a black man from America, because that's where he's from, right? And he had a few little Pittsburgh bits that he put in there.
Mhm.
Only people that went to school or have been in Pittsburgh would probably know, but it didn't matter. It was like three or four things, but it felt made the role feel a bit more like him.
Mhm.
And I think it was something that even if nobody in the audience understood it, it made him play his character better.
Right.
But what he was able to do was say, look, I'm not going to change the story of the script. All I'm going to do is bring my own interpretation of it to the show, and to the character. And yeah, he kind of came up with this almost backstory that he never has to tell the audience, but it's something for himself, where he is a black man who is persecuted in the US for being gay or being
Right.
flamboyant, or whatever, right? And he has to escape to basically pre-war Berlin. I think it's Berlin,
Yeah.
in order to be somebody who he feels like, uh, he can feel like himself. And then Nazi Germany and everything kind of starts happening around that. So you're watching this character go through the entire thing again, and how powerful that is, and how emotional that is for that character that he's playing. So, and again, it's just something that was very different from everything else I've seen. He didn't do a French accent and do all the different bits. He did this kind of version where he said, "Look, I'm Billy Porter, but I'm also not in this other person that we've never been able to experience before. And this is how I'm going to make this character mine." And that is just again something that makes him a master in what he does. And it makes a lot of actors a master of what they do. They're not trying to copy somebody else's thing. They're trying to find originality in nostalgia and in their own training and their own stories. So,
Excellent. I'd love to talk to you about Sycamore Gap. Um,
oh yeah, sure.
this is something that it was incredibly when I looked through it all. Um,
Hmm.
Again, it's another great project. If you wouldn't mind just like detailing it a little bit further, and
Sure.
then if you could answer then following, how you designed around loss without turning
Mm.
loss into a product.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Well, so for anybody that doesn't know, so Sycamore Gap Tree is a very, very famous site here in the UK. I'm trying to think of almost like a similar thing maybe in the US, but maybe like Arches National Park. What's the it's that really famous arch that's on all the
Yeah, it would be like if
postcards.
like Joshua
Somebody
Tree or
just came and knocked it
redwoods.
down.
Yeah,
Yes. Or like the tallest redwood exactly just got
exactly.
cut down, right? Yeah. So once that thing's cut down, it's not going back, at least in our lifetimes. And so when that happened, it really hit the UK because it had nothing to do it had nothing to do with money, had nothing to do with whatever, right? It was just literally two guys were like, I mean, they haven't really figured out the motive yet. I believe it's just like literally they were just bored and they came in the middle of the night and cut it down. And hikers found it the next day. So anyway, I never got to go. I know the tree from Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, with Kevin Costner and Morgan Freeman, and that's the tree again where they're on the way back to Nottingham, and they have a little fight scene underneath it. But um, that tree is such an iconic thing for the UK. We were, my team and I were kind of off of a Saudi project at the time. We wanted something that we felt a bit more passionate about, something that was a bit more, closer to home. We were just starting to work on Kindred at the time, and I said, look, I've got some, money I was going to use for marketing anyway, on the side. Why don't we put it toward a good cause? So this was back in, I guess, 2023 when it got cut down. Um, and yeah, we went down this road of, what could we do to creatively reuse the tree where it didn't have to do with, as you said, turning it into a product, or like, we didn't want it to turn into a bench or something like that.
Yeah,
Somewhere you've got this wood and you've got this place and you've got people that are connected to this thing, and there's probably tons of stories that we don't even know about that are connected to this tree. And this is a good way to kind of really kind of take a temperature check. So yeah, so I hired a good friend of mine, Eric Leota, who now works at Catapult actually, but he's a really talented concept artist. And it was myself and him essentially that said, look, we're going to set aside some days. The rest of the team's doing this other stuff, but we're going to set aside some time and yeah, create this concept and propose it to the National Trust. So we created a sculpture that uh, basically framed each one of these parts of the tree and shared the tree with different regions around the UK. So we had part A was that would only be in one area. The other part was that it would be in different regions of the UK. But essentially, the idea was that could we create a again timeless sculpture that plays on the idea of all the memories and things that happened underneath this tree that we don't know about. So that goes from, somebody riding by on a horse in the 1700s all the way to, a soldier proposing to his girlfriend after he comes back from war, or kids out on a day out in 2005 with their
right.
kids, with their parents or whatever, right? All these things need to kind of come out of it. And, they don't have to be specific stories, but it's supposed to ignite people's imaginations to go, oh, I remember when I was under that tree, and then maybe a grandmother tells her grandson about how the grandfather used to, take her there and he proposed underneath the tree. That we just basically wanted to have it as a conversation starter that then got these stories circulating, and that's what keeps these stories alive without the tree. And so yeah, we created this metal sculpture. Essentially it had two benches on either side which replicated the gap itself, Sycamore Gap. So you have these two benches that sit on either side, and then the tree itself underneath it has these kind of shadows almost to uh, these characters essentially, or these kind of human forms that kind of as you walk around the entire sculpture, they appear and then they disappear. Some of the visuals you'll be able to see it a bit better. But the whole idea was that these would be able to sit in different parts of the UK, whether they're in a park or in a town square, even or whatever, right? It's just something where people can kind of gather and understand and honor this tree. And then the tree, in a way, you could visit the entire UK by going and visiting each one of the Sycamore Gap sections. And then yeah, we created that as a piece. We submitted it to National Trust. Nothing came of it. And then 2 years later, they had a design competition that came out, and it was essentially saying, "Hey, look, we do actually want to do this." So I got in contact with them again, and I said, "Yeah, you still have our PDF." And so yeah, they ended up saying basically, yeah, we want to look at your PDF again. We're obviously opening it up to the entire UK as well, so architecture firms and everybody else was applying as well. So yeah, we ended up submitting that concept, and we submitted two other concepts as well. So that's still all in the talks right now about what they're going to do with the tree. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, they'll probably go with something a bit more local. So, for example, working with a local wood carver or something like that to kind of create more of a sculptural element, something that can maybe sit in a city hall or something like that. But again, from the theme park side of things, we wanted to create something that felt a bit more uh, like a not so much a sculpture, but a place, because that's what it was and that's what was lost. So and we've been trying to do more heritage projects over the years, and that was something that, again, it was poignant, and it was something that my entire team felt very passionate about doing. And yeah, at the end of the day, it's something that's very cool for the website. But yeah, hopefully maybe more comes out of it. And again, going back to our previous conversation of no idea is a bad idea, maybe this is something that we've learned for another project or something down the road, and it's something that again established a nice email chain, at least back and forth between Roadtrip Studios and the National Trust.
As we wrap up here, I'd
Sure.
love to ask you, kind of just like your little closing philosophy on this whole thing of when
Mm,
people encounter your best work or what you believe to be your best work, what
mm.
do you hope they feel that they can't quite explain? What do you believe about your work and your experience in design that when, what are you trying to like get out of people when they witness it?
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna sound like a very Bob Dylan answer, but I don't necessarily want them to feel something specific. You know what I mean? Like I think we, at least myself anyway, my team, and again, just have a very talented group of people that I get to have these amazing chats with all the time. But um, we really do think, let's create these worlds, and we want to create things that maybe people don't even understand themselves. These feelings that they've never felt before. Um, I don't want people to come into an experience feeling like they have to be a hero. I don't think people, not all people want to be heroes. I don't think people want to be, don't have to be victims either. They don't have to be players. They don't have to be passive. Whatever the environment makes them feel at that time, that's I think there's no idea necessarily of success. I think in terms of that really kind of high theme park philosophy of interactions and takeaways and things. I think almost the best takeaways, I think, from a theme park I have personally, I haven't told many people. It's something that's very personal to myself. And I think all my friends who have trusted me with that information as well, I would never say it on a podcast, but um, it's these really sweet kind of deep memories, and then some of them are actually pretty lighthearted, and they have to do with like eating popcorn or something like that, but it's stuff it's gonna sit in their hearts forever. And it's something that maybe they hopefully shared with somebody, but it could be something that's very personal to themselves, and something that's a bit more solo. But um any of the experiences I create are, again, they're scripts for people to basically find maybe something within themselves that they didn't find someplace else. But what that is, I don't know. And I don't want to necessarily be the person to say what it is. But that's part of the process of it. And hearing people whenever they do feel comfortable sharing it. I think the joy of being any artist is, you create something and it's a painting, let's say, on the wall, and somebody goes, you know what, that reminds me of this house that I used to go to. It was, destroyed in a hurricane, but it was actually the time of my life where I felt the most peace. And you're sitting there listening to them, and you're like, That's cool. It's not a house, but I'm glad you took that
Yeah.
away from it, right? But that's a joy though, because then you look at your own painting differently, and you're like, I've never seen a house, but now I can't unsee it. And that again, it's that human connection of finding these things in each other's work. Um, Even though theme parks are very commercial, they shouldn't be outside of the conversation of art because I think they
Oh
are one of
no.
the highest art forms in existence in a way. So, yeah. Anyway, I know. Hopefully, again, very Bob Dylan answer, but hopefully that answers the
It's
question.
absolutely the kind of thing that I love discussing. Trust me, I could talk ad nauseum
Yeah.
about this kind of thing. It's my personal belief in art in general that art is meant to evoke the intangible, regardless of what you are creating. Because, like
Mhm.
you said, what you end up making may not be what you thought it was going to create, but
Mhm.
if it inspires in any way, then it's done its job because it's
100%.
better to have done something to evoke, to create something that wasn't there before than to just be like, oh, that was nice. I feel
Yeah.
like that is the worst thing you can absolutely hear. Like, oh, that was nice because that is forgettable because then you're on and you have nothing to return to. But if you evoke something out of that experience, which is why experience is such the key word to what
Mhm.
you and a lot of like new firms are doing now,
Mhm.
because experiences stay with you. They stay like memory. Um, and
And that timeless stuff is gonna, it might be small now. We're working on very small theme parks, very small immersive theater bits. But the more that starts working and resonating with people, the less interesting these very big, big, big mega things are going to be because those things are very safe. They're very nice, right? They're very expensive, right? But that is not what makes, at the end of the day, a lot of money. What gets people coming back is these smaller moments and these things that they're very hard to capture. But again, they're not we're not trying to capture anything. We're trying to release things. It's these
right.
human memories and experiences. So, yeah. So I hope anyway that all the work that we're doing now, I'll look back on it 5 years, 10 years, 30 years, 50 years, whatever, and see it grow into something that I can't even imagine right now. I think we're at a really interesting part of history right now where I feel even though with all the doom and gloom of AI and possibly World War III, whatever, all this stuff. It's like, no, how lucky are we to be at a crux of human existence right now, where art and technology and everything can blend as well as it is, and be a part of the generation that can kind of figure out where that line is and be kind of in the wild west of really innovating that stuff. I know I miss the good old days. I'm not that old, but there was a nice little bit of good old days, of analog bits. But um, part of the joys of all this is that we get to innovate and change things. So my team and I are basically trying to embrace that as best we can. We're trying to work with companies and people that are doing that as well.
I always believe that imagination is only limited by the person who uses it, and
Mm.
the people that you are working with clearly have an unlimited amount of resource with their own
I
imagination. So you've worked,
hope so. That'd be
you put
nice.
yourself with a good team. Thomas, thank you
Thank you.
so much. Much
Of
appreciated for
course.
taking the time, and I
Thank you.
wish you nothing but the best of luck with everything that is going on in the
Thank you very
future.
much. Thank you. You as well. And thanks so much for having me on. Really appreciate it. And yeah, if there's any other questions or anything else, give us a shout.
Absolutely. All right, I'm
Awesome.
going to stop the
Cool.
recording there.